Hello, BookTube. I'm Shawn, the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with another bookish Zoom chat with a very special guest, Roz of Scallydandling About the Books. She has a fairly new... Hello, Roz. Welcome.
Hi. This is just such a scream, Shawn. I'm so made up to be doing this, I'll tell you.
I'm screaming more than you, so it's fantastic. So I like to do these Zoom chats with relatively new booktubers, and Roz has had a channel for about 6 months. But I remember Roz's first video, and I remember just being blown away by how she just arrived on BookTube fully formed. That first video was just consummate. It was just perfect, everything about it. And I've been a big fan ever since. And Roz needs an exponentially greater number of subscribers than she has so far. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have her on my channel. So, Roz, happy to have you here.
Oh, you're such a darling, Shawn. Did you know?
Well, I was hoping you would go into detail.
Everybody tells you that. Everybody tells you that.
So you kind of came to BookTube through the family. So why don't we start with that?
Yes, because my first video was my own, was not in a way, it wasn't my first video on BookTube because I'd done a few with Tilly. So I kind of cheated because I practiced on Tilly's shelf. And she was a real dark horse, you know, when she joined BookTube, because she did it for a while before she let on to me. So she and I have always talked about books, but she kept it a bit kind of hush hush till she was happy. And then I had to go and watch all her back catalogue, as it were. Yeah.
I happen to know, and I won't mention them by name, but I know of another mother-daughter booktuber that had a similar dynamic.
Oh, I'm intrigued now. I'm going to be.
I'll tell you offline.
Tilly and I, there's like a kind of like just a little bit of rivalry there, you know.
Well, I'm on Team Roz because I haven't made the time to explore Tilly's channel. I did today to prepare to chat with you, and I was like, my God, she and I have very similar tastes too.
Oh, you do. So I think she has more subscribers than I do, but I get more views. Not that we're counting or anything, you know.
Well, now I feel like I better have her on the channel too, so I don't. And this is not where the bookish people in your family ends. There's a couple of men that.
Yeah.
Tell us about them.
I drag the men in. I would say kicking and screaming, but actually secretly they both love it.
Yeah, I can tell.
So Alfred particularly enjoys it, I think, because a little bit of him would like to have a channel himself. It would all be around kind of fantasy and stuff, which actually there's a whole big BookTube world that is that sort of thing, isn't there, that you and I aren't part of. But yeah, he and I love to talk. So, and then Steve.
So that's your son. That's
my son.
Alfred's your son.
That's my son Alfred with the beard, which Jason on Byways in Bookland described Alf's beard as majestic.
That's fabulous.
So yeah, this is our new selling point. You know, we have a majestic beard. And then yes, I sometimes inveigle Steve into taking part because Steve's a big reader in the same way that I am, but he's a bit shyer about coming on BookTube, and he likes a little space to be kind of taken seriously, unlike me and Tilly and Alf. So I have to be careful with making videos with him that I give him. I don't just talk over him.
And that's Mr. Scallydandling, right?
Yep, Mr. Scallydandling.
Yeah. So that's fantastic. I hope they all get their own channels, and I'd like to have the whole family on a Zoom chat someday. There's a plan. So now, tell us about the Scallydandling.
Oh, yes. Goodness me, should I have chosen that name? Because people always struggle to say it.
No.
Scallydandling, I kind of had Tilly to thank for that name because she used to do like care work. She's a nurse now, but before she went to study in Brighton. And Scallydandling is like a Sussex word. And one of the old women in her 90s with dementia that she went to care for, she'd get her talking about when she was young. And she used to say about how she scallydandled around Brighton in her day, getting up to no good. And we just loved the phrase so much that it became like a family word, you know.
Fantastic. So it literally means what? Meander?
Or a bit more like romp around, being slightly hedonistic, you know, having fun. I picked it for the channel because one of the things that I knew that I wanted to do on BookTube was talk about books kind of like from around the world. That's one of my reading enthusiasms, especially I was going to say in later life, that makes me sound ancient, but you know what I mean. It's one of my sort of mature reading enthusiasms. And so I thought, yeah, I like to go off on a bit of a scallydandle.
You and me both. So let's just keep going with that. What kind of a reader are you?
I'm a voracious reader, I would say. I will read anything, but the older I get, and again, you know, that makes it sound like I'm positively geriatric, but I think of myself as an older reader now that has read a lot over my life. I did this calculation so I'm 56, so let's say at best I've probably got 30 years left of focused reading before I get to the point where I can only reread a book I've read 10 times before because I can't remember one chapter when I get to the next one. So say 100 books a year, 30 years, that is only 3,000 books. How scary is that? You know, so you've got to get a bit more picky, haven't you, when you've only got 3,000 books left?
Well, that's fascinating because we're very close in age. I'm 54.
Oh, right. Yeah. Wait, do you have that?
Yes, but to me, 3,000 is a lot. I now read quite voraciously too, but I remember 10 years, 15 years ago, I was reading about 12 or 15 books a year. And then I did that same math and I thought, oh my God, there's not very many books left. And I think that's when I started bailing. We'll get to bailing a little later. But now I read about the same amount as you. And so, yeah, 3,000, I'm choosy. My choosing comes in bailing early, but we'll get to that. But anyway, yes, so you read internationally.
And there was a certain point in my life when I realized I'm reading an awful lot of books by dead white men and then living white men, possibly more Americans than I want to read and more. And you just think, actually, why am I doing that? I started keeping a tally of men and women. That was the first thing I did. And the power of keeping a tally is unbelievable because the first year that I kept a tally, I was probably 1/3 women, 2/3 men. By the second year, it was like 50-50, and now I always read more women than men. And then I thought I could apply the same approach to getting beyond England, British Isles, America, Canada, Australia. And so I started keeping a record of all the different countries I'd read a book from. And then that became a bit obsessive because then, you know, and now I've got to read something from every country, all 195, 196, depending on how you count. So that's like a bit of a mission. But I read quite a lot of just works in translation and works from other places generally. But I'm ticking them off the list at the same time.
That's awesome. I used to keep track on a monthly basis. How many books am I reading that are by writers that are not white and by men and stuff? And now I don't because I just kind of naturally gravitate to the diverse titles. And I hate using diverse as an adjective that way. Not diverse titles, but those kind of books.
Language is really difficult for that sort of thing. You get tied up in, like, do you talk about writers of color or do you talk, it's like whichever words you use, someone is going to tell you that is wrong. So, you know. I
just kind of semantically, I just really object to using diverse to talk about an author or a book. A book is not diverse unless it has a whole bunch of different kind of people in it. And an author cannot be diverse unless, I mean, it just, no, diverse reading, yes, but not diverse book, not diverse writer. And I bit my tongue a few minutes ago, Roz. I was going to make a terrible pun about, you were talking about tallying up your books, and I resisted the pun about tally-dandling.
I thought of that one.
But of course, I put it in retrospect.
Oh, brilliant. Well done you. Don't hold back. Good puns are good. But the tally thing is interesting because, I mean, I kind of still do, but I kind of add on in different things because you're right. You only have to do it for a while and you just naturally then what you look for and the connections you make between books mean that it's like the center of gravity of your reading shifts. That's what it is. And once you've made that shift, you don't need to be watching it in the same way, do you? But I might think more now about how many sort of LGBTQ writers that I read, because each time you bring something into focus, naturally your reading accommodates to it.
That's right. That's right. So 2 things about other booktubers. I can't remember her channel name, so I'll put it in text form. But
Yeah.
her name is Sophie. She is a youngish booktuber, reads a lot of literary fiction. Do you know who I mean?
Yeah, but it's not one I follow regularly. Should I?
I don't think she puts out many videos anymore, but she developed an Excel spreadsheet that apparently I've never used it, but I've heard just really fantastic things about how easy it is to use her freely available. I'll try to figure out how you get it. I think she put it in Google Drive and she put a link in a video. So lots of booktubers use it to track all of those things. Translation, female, from Indonesia, and you can do it all and do
Ah,
charts and stuff. And it's apparently the thing
I, I,
to use.
I need that.
Okay,
I need.
so I will track that down and put information, if I can find it, and I'll put information in the show notes and make sure that you have it. And then I would be shocked if you don't know about Mel of Mel's Bookland Adventure.
Oh yeah.
And she has the Round the World book club.
Yes.
Now, so Mel is a dear friend of mine, and
All right.
she did, what was the name of it? Gone with the Book last year, to read books published between 1900 and 1950. And I remember I said to Mel, I said, I don't think my subscribers will notice I'm doing it because that's what I read anyway. But
That's true.
a little later, we'll get into some of those topics. Aside from international and translated fiction, what other kind of things float your bibliophiliac boat?
I like a book that stretches my mind a bit. I'm not a lazy reader. I can enjoy a relaxation read, but I quite like being in the prickle zone. Do you know what I mean by the prickle zone?
No,
You
please
know?
tell me what you mean. That's fabulous.
Well, you know, when you feel just slightly uncomfortable, like you're just on the edge of understanding and appreciating something, and you're being pulled just that step beyond. I suppose it's the opposite of the comfort zone, isn't it? The prickle zone.
Can you give some examples of books that have put you into the prickle zone?
The prickle zone. So your classic prickle zone writers, I mean, like historically, it's like Woolf and Joyce and Faulkner, you know, they're the biggies, aren't they? They're prickle zone. But currently, Clarice Lispector, I'm really hooked on her now. You know, when you find a writer and you just think, I want to read everything this woman's ever written. Yes. So I'm working my way through her. Olga Tokarczuk.
Okay.
She's had 2 out in English, you know, translated into English so far, Polish writer. She's definitely in the prickle zone. Some of the things that I read from places around the world very much fall into that category. It's not like they're like a modernist writer or whatever, but it's more like they're writing from a different literary tradition. And so you kind of have that discomfort. We have to work at kind of understanding where they're coming from, I suppose.
Clarice Lispector, I can't remember what I've heard about her, but I know that everything I've heard about her has made me think that she's not for me. What do you think?
I think she might be a Bale. Yeah.
Does she write mysteries?
No. I mean, she writes stream of consciousness. It's all, you know how with some writers people say, oh, they really get under the skin of ideas or really under the skin of people. Okay, now my description of Clarice Lispector would be she gets under the skin and then she cuts through the muscle and then she goes right down to the inner organs and the bones and the guts. Plot basically kind of just gets left behind. It's all about the words. And I was thinking, you said the other day that you'd abandoned Marlena by Ingeborg Bachmann, and I'm thinking if that was a no for you, then Lispector's I think Lispector is a better writer.
Uh-huh.
So maybe I should keep having a go, but
I should have a go. I should try it. There's no harm in trying. But what I've heard about her stuff has made me think maybe not for me. And same for Olga Tokarczuk. I'm waiting for her to write a book that sounds interesting to me, but she's written one book and everybody says it's a novel about travel. What? That's not a theme of a novel. What the hell? I don't get it. And then she's written another one that's kind of murder mystery or something. And I just these things do not sound like my things that I want to read about. But I'm interested in her if she'd write a book. She just needs to write a Shawn book.
Yeah, but actually, and the title's gone out of my head, so and it'll come back to me in a minute. But the more recent one that is like, yeah, a sort of murder mystery in theory, that could be a Shawn book. In that, it has these really, you like characters, don't you, in your books? Okay, so it has this wonderfully quirky main female protagonist who is superbly bizarre. I love a bizarre protagonist and the people that she interrelates with, and it has that kind of humor in it, that kind of picking fun of people, and it is a murder mystery, but that's not really how I'd characterize it, if you know what I mean. Yeah, I think that would be the one to try. Maybe you might enjoy it more than you think.
Well,
yeah,
I love when that happens. I have a strong allergy to murder mystery, so
oh no, wouldn't describe it as a murder mystery. That's the wrong description. It's more like it's a book of characters and eccentricity.
Well, I shall take that under advisement. You and Tilly have done a series of videos where you read plays and talk about plays, so you read drama.
Yeah, that was Tilly's idea for a joint project, just to do, because like my thing with ticking off countries, I have this kind of Protestant work ethic about my reading a bit. Every month I'll try and read like a non-fiction book, a collection of poetry, as if I have a duty. And she said, oh, we should read on the same way. We should decide to read a play every month because we don't often read drama. And then we thought, oh, well, yeah, and if we're going to do that, we might as well make a thing of it and talk about it on BookTube. So we have been doing a play every month this year. And actually, it's got me reading a lot more drama. I think of drama as, I love going to the theatre. I don't tend to read it. And there's actually a lot to be got out of reading it. Yeah.
The one that I saw recently was Brian Friel translation, which I studied, and so I read it. I've never seen it performed, and I studied it as an undergrad decades ago, and remember loving it. So, yeah,
I think I'd stopped reading plays because I associate reading them with study. As you say, it's the kind of thing that I did for my A levels. When you pick apart Shakespeare or whatever, and I'd forgotten that it could actually be a pleasure to read a play.
I have rarely read any recently. So you live in Sussex, in Brighton.
Yeah, in good old Sussex by the sea. Yeah.
I have one book set there. Let me grab it. I'd like to talk to you about it.
Really? Oh, I haven't read that.
Midwinter by Fiona Melrose. Now, let me check. Oh, no.
Wrong one?
You were laughing about my Worcester pronunciation. You now get to laugh at my confusing Sussex with Suffolk. This is set in Suffolk. Set in Suffolk. But this is, anyway, we'll talk about it for a minute anyway. It's a lovely novel set in Suffolk. It's about a farmer and his contentious relationship with his eldest son. And the mother, they had moved to Africa and tried to start farming there, and the mother was murdered. And then they came back, and it's beautiful. It's her debut novel. I absolutely loved it.
That sounds like a Rose book, because I have an affection for Suffolk because my mother grew up on a farm in Suffolk.
Oh, well, there you go. There you go.
Which is why I enjoyed All Among the Barley, which you didn't.
Right. You're right. And I was disappointed that I didn't. This one I loved. This was 2016.
Okay, one for me to look out for.
Melrose, I believe. She lives in Johannesburg, and her second novel is called Johannesburg and is set there. And I didn't like it. I couldn't finish it. But this, I think her family comes from Suffolk. And
right. I shall add it to the TBR.
Yes, please do.
But Sussex and Brighton in particular, it's such a literary kind of place.
So please.
You know what I mean?
No, please tell me. Go on. I'll go off on a tangent with that.
Yeah, I always go off on tangents. Kelly of Books I'm Not Reading?
Yes.
She created a tag years ago called Down My Way or Down Your Way. And it's a tag to write about books from where you live. So I started kind of thinking about what I'd talk about if I were talking about Brighton and Sussex, and came up with such a long list that I thought I can't even do this tag because there's just, how can I choose? How can I choose between?
So my suggestion for choosing is, if you can do this, talk about books that you think people that from outside of Sussex might not have heard of.
Oh, so like not Virginia. Yeah, not Virginia Woolf then. She's from Sussex. Not Kipping. He's from Sussex. No.
Although it's interesting to hear who's from Sussex, that I had no idea that that's where Virginia Woolf was from.
Yeah, well, London, and she lived most of her adult life, like just kind of down the road from here. But do you know, the one that I think the person that I would recommend to you, well, to anyone, is Patrick Hamilton.
Okay, that name's
And
familiar.
it might, so he wrote a book, Hangover Square, that most of the action happens. It happens kind of between London and Brighton and Hove. Brilliant writer. He drank himself to death. He was very louche, Patrick Hamilton, if you know what I mean. He's one of those, you know, those kind of tragically flawed men that write brilliant books that kind of ooze sex, but in a very British early to mid 20th century way, you know.
Oh, I have one of his books on my Kindle, Craven House.
Yes, right. Well, yeah, read some Patrick Hamilton, and yeah, he has a special link with Brighton, so there's one.
Anybody else?
Oh,
Brighton Beach Memoirs. That's different, isn't it?
yeah, there's a Brighton Beach in America, isn't there? It's probably that.
Well, I'll leave that in
Right.
just so everybody knows what an idiot I am.
But Brighton Rock, obviously, Graham Greene, obviously he's not from Sussex, but you know, Brighton has this reputation as a town, as a city, for being a place to come and misbehave, I suppose. So
There's
hence
a place
it
to come and
does.
Scallydandle.
It is a place to come and Scallydandle. You know, even comes like even in Jane Austen, Brighton is the place where you go to get into trouble. Like Lydia in Pride and Prejudice, that's its sort of natural associations.
That's fabulous. You were very prominently involved in Jane in July. What is it called?
Jane Austen July. Oh,
Jane Austen.
do you know, it was Jane Austen July a year ago, and Tilly being involved in that made me start to think, yeah, maybe I'd like to have a channel. I could get with this and start. I talk about books endlessly, so you know, why not record it? But that whole thing of different people around the world all homing in on one author and infusing about it, I found very appealing.
It's fabulous. I love Jane Austen, but I haven't reread her. I studied her as an undergrad, and I think I did all of them. But I am now ready to reread, and I have a standing offer with a friend from Canada to buddy read Emma, which is my favorite.
Oh, yes. Oh, I reread Emma this year.
I remember.
And you know, I always say I'm not a great rereader, which is why I ended up doing the rereading tag just recently. But Jane Austen has always been the exception. She's the only writer where I've read all her main novels and reread them multiple times. And there's nobody else like that for me. She epitomizes what I love about writing, I suppose. She writes so perfectly, but she's also wicked, you know?
And nobody was more wicked than Emma.
Exactly.
Do you have a favorite Victorian writer?
Yes, George Eliot. Has to be George Eliot.
A favorite George Eliot novel?
Oh, Middlemarch, obviously, because, you know, the Virginia Woolf quote about Middlemarch.
For grown-ups, yeah.
Yep, and it's true. And people think of her as quite serious, but she, again, is a very funny writer. The way she, almost satirical about people. And that's something that I enjoy in a book, I guess.
I am going to be tackling Felix Holt for Victober.
Oh.
Do you think I'll like it?
Yes, but if you're doing that, then maybe I'll reread it. This could be time for, because it's a long time since I read that. So
I read it. So.
Ooh, exciting.
Yes.
I like Victober. Victober is
I love Victober so much. I thought this year I was going to get away from doing the readathons and just kind of read Victorian literature and women in translation throughout the year, but that doesn't happen. And I actually love fussing over the TBR and concentrating my reading for a month. And inevitably it spills over. Like some of my women in translation books, I'll be reading well into the autumn, and that's fine. But I do like the getting all, women in translation and Victober are my two favorites.
Yeah, but I like the, you know, when you're watching things on BookTube and you come across a readathon that you haven't heard about, and it just prompts you to read something that maybe has been in the back of your mind for a while. So the beginning of this month this month when we're recording this, was Read-a-thon, which you can explain to me what that's about. So it was a Canadian readathon, and it's read and then EH readathon, and I gather this is some sort of Canadian thing. So you tell me, and then I'll tell you the book that I read for it.
It's a Canadian, what's the word for that tag at the end? In Japanese, they say ne, and it's you're seeking agreement. Not seeking agreement, it's just a way, and it's pretty, Canada's not so class-based as the UK, but it's pretty lower class, uneducated, but it is something that I say sometimes, often to act the stereotype, but it's just at the end of a lot of sentences among a particular strand of the Canadian population, and it was made famous by a satirical TV show that was really popular in the 80s, SCTV, which produced a lot of the Canadian stars that became Hollywood stars, but they all got their start on SCTV. SCTV was also a comedy club in Canada, Toronto, I think, and maybe Chicago. But this TV show was definitely Canadian, and the two famous characters are Bob and Doug McKenzie, brothers, who are, well, let's just watch.
Okay. Great White North. I like it already.
North, I'm Bob McKenzie. This is my brother Doug. How's it going? Okay, our topic today is the Great White North, because we've got like lots of mail, about it,
Yeah.
Okay, so this. By the way, this topic was my idea, Yeah. But, okay. Great White North. Okay, on the map. Now here is different color because it's like USA, and up there same color as Alaska, because that's like Hawaii. Okay. So the whole thing is the Great White North, and the blue, like the ocean, right? Because water's blue. He's a genius, It's like...
Okay, I think
I get the picture.
So that's why the lovely booktubers that have put on the Canadian readathon, it's the Canada Athon.
That's it. That is brilliant. And I have a load of family in Canada, but I've never, I guess because their parents are English, because it's like, my brother and so on. So maybe they haven't picked up the A, probably.
Well, you can go down an SCTV rabbit hole on YouTube if you want.
Yeah. But the book I actually was prompted to read by the readathon was Indian Horse by Richard Wagamese.
Wagamese.
Yeah. How do you pronounce it?
Richard Wagamese.
Wagamese, yeah. Which my nephew from British Columbia recommended to me. And this is where we switch from the laughing face to the serious face. Boy, what a traumatic book. Beautiful book. But it was fascinating to me because I had a brother who was living in Northern Ontario in the 1960s, 70s. I went to visit Kapuskasing, this kind of wood pulp town in, where part of the book is, that's the area where it's set, kind of at the time he was writing about. And I did not have a clue about the experience of like First Nation Canadians at that time. And that book kind of really, when a book, it's not perfectly written, but it just hits you in the heart and makes you feel, which I would never imagined for a book that has huge chunks about ice hockey in it.
It's the ice hockey that's prevented me from reading it, but I am familiar with Wagamese's stuff. My mom loves all of his stuff. It's Indian Horse, right?
Indian Horse, yeah.
Recently made into a movie, or maybe a TV miniseries. I forget which, but and I've heard good things about that. The one book by Richard Wagamese that I've read and loved was kind of like a spiritual autobiography.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a very spiritual person, but these were like bite-sized essays that were about how he connected throughout his life with Indigenous spirituality, and it was not preachy, and it was very accessible to me as somebody who woo stuff like that. It makes me usually run the other direction.
I was going to say that's the sort of book that I would avoid like the plague, because anything that's slightly woo-woo is like,
yeah, and this one was not. Now, I know another booktuber read it on my recommendation and didn't like it at all, so it's not for everybody. But it's called One Native Life, so I'll put up that link here. I have a couple of other books of his on my shelf that I haven't gotten to, but my mom was a big fan. And it was really sad when he died so young, about 5 years ago.
I guess he died prematurely, essentially, because of his alcohol use, and that's so tied up with, well, it's just, it's very sad, isn't it? He kind of found a route out through writing, but actually it wasn't enough.
And a lot of the health problems that Indigenous people in Canada have, we colonialists and our ancestors are directly responsible for how we shoved them into reserves and didn't give them proper food. And
yeah, you just read the book about clearing the plains.
That's right.
Yeah, that sounded really interesting.
Yeah, my review will go up in the next couple of weeks, but yeah, that was just a shattering experience to read, and it's going to be hard for me to talk in polite company about Canada with other colonial settler Canadians, because we have a lot of things to atone for on behalf of our ancestors.
I've just started following a American booktuber. Just got to remember the name of her channel, because it's such a good channel name. It's something like Warrior Woman.
Native Book Warrior.
Yeah, that's it. She's from somewhere in the sort of Southwest, and she's just such a charming woman. But she's kind of then introducing via her, I'm picking up on other kind of other Indigenous booktubers, as it
wonderful.
were.
It's Native Lady Book Warrior.
That's it. Yeah, now that is just the coolest title for a booktube channel, isn't it? Native Lady Book.
She is in Arizona, raised on the Hopi Res.
Yeah, and so I'm just sort of looking at some of her recommendations, and I always feel like we read too many American books in the UK, and they're all a particular sort of American, aren't they? And now even like our Booker Prize, now I know you don't talk about book prizes.
That's all right, no worries.
But the Booker Prize is basically gone out of the window for me now, because they accepted Americans. I just don't understand it. It used to be a prize where you'd get Indian authors writing in English, or it was like, exactly, the English-speaking literary world. And the moment you bring the US into that, it just completely distorts it, because it's just so much bigger market, isn't it? So that has really annoyed me. But I am really interested in reading another side of America, I guess. And so Louise Erdrich, I was only discovered recently, and everybody loves Louise Erdrich, don't they?
One of my top reads this year is her, what was it?
Or Plague of Doves, maybe?
Plague of Doves.
Yeah.
That was a strong recommendation to me from Greg of Supposedly Fun, and I loved it too. Yeah. Britta Bowler, I believe, is reading her complete works this year. Is one of her main reading projects of 2020.
Yeah, but Britta got us all reading German books this year, so she's cheating.
She's reading everything. Talk about this reader, hey? This has been an absolute delight, Roz. So what are you going to pick up next off your reading pile?
And then I've gone completely blank when you asked.
I could ask a different question like that.
How about I tell you the thing that I've just most recently finished? Because I've got several things on the go at the moment, so then I'm kind of confused as to which I'm picking up next. The thing I finished really recently was a book from Suriname called The Cost of Sugar. It's historical fiction, and the woman that wrote it, Cynthia MacLeod, she sounds like kind of British, doesn't she? Whereas she's absolutely Surinamese. But Suriname's just such an interesting country because it's so ethnically diverse, and it's the only country in the world that has Dutch as its official language other than the Netherlands.
Wow.
So this is written in Dutch, and it's kind of a book about the slave plantation history of Suriname, and that's the kind of book that my Scallydandling kind of brings me to, that I never would have read, that I really a lot of pleasure and fascination from, I suppose.
I have never heard of that book. I will be checking that out myself. Thank you. So this is a perfect way to end, you out there in BookTube viewer land, because Roz is just an absolute breath of fresh air on BookTube, my favorite new channel, and if you haven't seen why, I don't know what's wrong with you. So Roz, thank you so much for, I hope you'll come back. In fact, we're going to do another video recommending and talking about some older female writers.
And enthusiasm we share.
That's right. So thank you very much.
Bye.